Today we're making salsa con queso, otherwise known as nacho cheese. Now, the great thing about this recipe is that unlike so many other recipes, this one does not have any Velveeta. It does not have any weird oils like soybean oil or canola oil or vegetable oil. And it's still super creamy, not gritty at all, and has real cheese in it. Let's get started. So to make my salsa con queso, you are not going to need a whole lot of ingredients, but let's go over everything you're going to need. First of all, you're going to need some butter, because we're going to be making a roux. So we're doing a full stick of butter that is equivalent of 8 tablespoons or 1/2 cup. We're going to be doing a 1/4 cup or 38 grams of all-purpose flour. Then we're going to be doing a full can of evaporated milk. You could do the same amount of just regular milk, of course. It would be 12 ounces. It will work just fine regardless of what you do with that. Then, of course, we'll have some cheddar cheese. I have 4 ounces or 112 grams of cheddar cheese. And then the coup de grace, the most important ingredient that's really just going to make a big difference in how creamy this is, and will also help get rid of the grittiness that comes naturally when making it with regular real cheese, and that is cream cheese. So we're going to actually use an entire box of this. This stuff works extremely well, and it will give you that creaminess, of course, without having to deal with the Velveeta or fake oils and things like that. Now, some other things that are going to go in here, these are more optional ingredients, but I'm going to put a can of Rotel tomatoes. We're not draining this at all, but we are going to put that in there. Also going to add some dry granulated garlic. And if we need any extra saltiness, we'll add a little bit of seasoning salt. Now, something I do want to point out with this is that when you initially mix up a lot of this stuff, it's going to be very thick, but it's also going to be super rich, which is why we will add some water to it. I know that might seem kind of counterintuitive to add water, but trust me, that is what you need to thin it out. And because of the fact that you have the flour and the butter making that nice roux, that will help to thicken it up even better. And that way it won't get too thin, but it will be thin enough with all the ingredients added. So with all that being said, let's get started making the sauce. All right, so to get this going, we have our Instant Pot on the saute function. Of course, you can do this obviously on a stove top. You want to do medium heat. That'll work just fine. So we'll start off by putting in our full stick of butter. Just want to keep it moving well enough to keep it from, if you let it sit in one spot too long, it can start to burn. But we just want it to get it melted. And after it's melted, we'll add the flour to get our roux prepared. And technically, you can make a roux with really equal parts butter and flour, but I like to go a little heavier on the butter because, mostly just because then you're less likely to end up with clumps. Even though once you mix it, it doesn't make a huge difference. For me, it makes a difference in flavor as well. So, and considering the fact that we'll be watering down the overall mixture by adding water to it, it's a good thing, at least in my opinion, to have a little more, I guess, fluid roux than you would have otherwise. So let's get that butter fully melted. Then we'll add our flour. Of course, you can use a whisk if you like. I'm just using a spoon because it's easier rather than dirtying multiple dishes, especially because initially the sauce is going to be very thick with this. The idea, all you really want to do with the roux here is you're just trying to get it to where you don't have any more clumps of flour left. Or if you do, it's very, very few. You just want it to be well mixed in with the butter. And of course, if you're doing only if you're doing a 1/4 cup of each with flour and butter, it's going to be more of a thick, a bit of a thick mixture. So now that's pretty well mixed. We're going to go ahead and add our full can of evaporated milk. We'll just stir that around a bit. Basically, we just kind of want the mixture to start to thicken up Once it starts to thicken up, then we'll start adding our cheese. But if you add the cheese too early, then it's going to make it more difficult for everything to properly combine together, because the cheese just isn't going to melt. So you could end up with it getting stuck to the bottom, and it just ends up being more of a hassle. Like I said, this is going to end up really thick when you start off. I mean, like right now, it's starting to thicken up. It's getting there, but it's not quite there yet. All right, it's thick enough now at this point. We can go ahead and add our cheese. I know a lot of people would say, oh, you should add the cheese more slowly than you do. But honestly, I found that it makes little to no difference, especially because of the fact that we'll be thinning it out with the additional liquid after a while. So just go ahead and start getting the cheese mixed in so that it's starting to melt nicely. I'm telling you though, whatever you do, do not skip the cream cheese unless you just want to use Velveeta, which you can. But I personally, I don't like the texture of Velveeta more than anything else, and it is kind of overly rich. I mean, it's not terrible if you mix it with some real cheese and that sort of thing, but I know that there's a lot of people out there, myself included, who just don't really care for Velveeta. And when a friend of ours suggested the idea of adding cream cheese to it, I thought it was a stroke of brilliance, and I tried it, and it worked out wonderfully. So go ahead and add the cream cheese now. And start to break that up and then mix it in. And as with the cheddar cheese, we just want to get that well incorporated. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, because you'll still be mixing this a lot even after, especially after you add the additional liquid to it. And I know some people would assume that, oh, it's a good idea to add more milk because that helps to thin it out. And yes, adding more milk can do it, but I find that just ends up making it even richer. And while the richness is good to a degree, that's kind of part of the reason why I don't particularly care for Velveeta, because it ends up a little bit too rich, even though I like the additional tang that it provides. And so that cream cheese is pretty well incorporated at this point. So now we're going to go ahead and add our full can of Rotel tomatoes, and we're doing that undrained, so that'll add some additional liquid that way. That'll already start to help thin it out a little bit, but it's definitely going to need more liquid in order to get to the proper consistency. Now, of course, you could always just leave it exactly like this, and I mean, look at that. That's gorgeous. But it's just very thick, and I like it to be a bit easier to spread. And also, on top of that, as you heat this, it's going to thicken up even further, which is why we need to add some additional liquid in order to thin it out. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and add some water. I have 2 cups of just regular water here. I'm only going to use a little bit at a time, kind of mix it up, and really just add it until it gets to a thickness you like. Keep in mind that even though initially it might thin it out quite a bit, as it heats, it's still going to thicken up. So I definitely recommend just keeping up to 2 cups with you. Obviously, if you're making a larger batch, then you may end up needing more, but this in and of itself is going to really help in getting it properly thinned out so that it's not quite so thick and rich. And that way it's better for like drizzling on nachos, for example. We'll do a quick taste test, see if it's getting close here. It's definitely got some good flavor. But now, of course, we're going to go ahead and add a bit of garlic powder. I'm going to add roughly about a teaspoon, somewhere between a teaspoon and a tablespoon. Honestly, I'm kind of just faking it. And also sprinkle in some seasoning salt. Probably do about half a teaspoon worth. And you can really just kind of season it to your liking. I've only made it this way a couple of times, and so I'm really just basically faking it. But in terms of the way this stuff comes out, it's pretty easy to get it where you want it, as long as you don't add too much at any given time. I would just add a little bit at a time, taste it, see if it's to your liking. And of course, if you need to, you can add additional liquid to help thin it out, or if you get it too salty, you know, that can also help. And then just kind of play with it until you get the balance just right. Give us another taste. And yeah, I think that's pretty much perfect. Might need, well, you take a quick look here. So it's got a good level of thickness to it, and it's thickening up even more as it sits on low heat. But at this point, I think it's basically done, ready to go. But we're gonna go ahead and let this just stay on warm function, and then we'll put together our nachos. Now the taste test.
It's so good. The cream cheese makes it so smooth, so cheesy. It's not overly rich. It's very, very good.
All right, so definitely got to get one of those pickled jalapenos because I love these things, along with this beautiful nacho cheese. I'm telling you, for years I've been trying to make a really good salsa con queso, and this is the first time ever since I learned about this idea of doing cream cheese instead of Velveeta. It's just a game changer. It absolutely makes a difference. You don't have to deal with using Velveeta. You don't have to deal with using the fake oils. I know that there's a lot of people out there who are really sensitive about that kind of stuff, but this is just fantastic. You absolutely should make this if you enjoy good salsa con queso. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like if you liked this video, subscribe to the channel, and share with your friends, and stay tuned for more recipes that, while not necessarily authentic, are always delicious. So with all that being said, let's get started making this. Initially, the roux is going to be very thick. Or sorry, get one of those pickled jalapenos.